So the very first is Highlands has invested in a Forerunner floodplain platform, which allows all of your residents, all of your investors to find site-specific flood information to their particular property. So this is a way for you to meet the new legislative rule that, realtors and, investors need to know that properties are in the flood zone. So we've implemented this website and built web pages on your municipal website under flood protection information. So there's a plethora of information. And just to let you know that every one of these tasks become community rating system points. So many of this is tied back to the actual application to get the credits from FEMA. But we're going to go over what it is. There's a lot of misnomers throughout the community of what it is. So Highlands Borough is a FEMA NFIP community. Without FEMA NFIP status, securing flood insurance would be extremely difficult. So you are part of that program. And it involves floodplain management, being part of NFIP. You participate with NFIP. You initiated it in the very beginning of August of 22 with your floodplain management regulations that were adopted then, part of your land use regulations. And we launched in 2024 a compliant floodplain permitting process. That is something that Highlands did not have. It's a full permitting process to support initiating an application in the future. And of course, I talked about public information and education. And of course, we now have, under the leadership of Stephen Winters, our construction official and certified floodplain administrator, a full-blown, homegrown office to help your residents and investors. And I just want to take a second. Behind me is my super colleague, Alicia Jones, who's tech assistant working with Stephen Winters and part of the team in the new office that we've been able to make such progress on this in short order. So again, with more housekeeping. Something that's very important, I think, for all of you is that the state of New Jersey unified the Uniform Construction Code, the UCC, with the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, for special flood hazard areas. Now, one of the interesting things is I've met some of the community partners. They say, well, we really don't want CRS because we might have to do certain things, this and that. And the point that I'm trying to make with this, devoting a whole slide to it, is the fact that it's here. And these floodplain regulations must be adhered to. The CRS is kind of like a bonus. You could take advantage of all the things that you must do now, the ordinance going back to 2022, that floodplain management regulation that you adopted. All these benefits for CRS are something that you'll be able to capture, but it's not like it's an option. Like, well, because a lot of people say, well, a lot of business people have communicated that to me. Well, we don't really want CRS. We don't want to go there. We're fine with the discounts. So it's a moot point. I just wanted to emphasize.
Not to jump in, but just it's one of those things that it doesn't matter if we do CRS or not. These are still the floodplain regulations. CRS has nothing to do with it.
Absolutely.
The benefit that we get by joining into the CRS program is that everybody that has to get flood insurance will get lower flood insurance. So it's only about saving people money.
Right. So I wanted to make a point of that. And then the other thing I wanted to identify is what difference does it make for the residents? And there's a lot of differences that it makes. Flood insurance without FEMA NFIP would be cost prohibitive. I mean, if you were home alone in a community and you weren't participating, there'd be some huge challenges for people to protect themselves, particularly after you had some kind of a hazard event. it impacts residents' flood insurance costs. Properties that are not in compliance with your ordinance passed in 2022, they pay more for insurance, without a doubt. Over time, the NFIP floodplain management will contribute and make Highlands more resilient for coastal hazards. And additionally, that compliance will allow us to become certified with community rating, where there will be discounts that will be able to be levied to residents. Residents that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the National Violation Tracker, which Highlands, when I came on board, we had a punch list of 300 properties that are on FEMA's national violation list that they encouraged me must be mitigated. That in itself is a tall order. But anyone still on that national violation tracker list will never be able to get CRS discounts should we get certified. It's just a, matter of fact. They're not eligible for it because it's a property that is not mitigated. And those properties, national violation trackers, have received money from FEMA. So they've already received funding and been declared, damaged. So in essence, that's why the restriction is there, for that specific reason. Now, what is FEMA CRS? A lot of people say, well, don't understand what it is. NFIP offers reasonably priced flood insurance to all properties and communities that have standards for floodplain management, which Highlands does. You put that in place in 2022. The CRS credits community efforts beyond the minimum standards by reducing flood insurance premiums for the community's property owners. And the CRS discounts on flood insurance premium, they range from 5 to 45% based on the points awarded. So we have that range. I called the county because I want to be able to deliver back to you. There's a little booklet that Monmouth County gives out, shows all the points very succinctly. I only have the one. I'll leave it with Nancy, but I will be getting enough for the entire governing body. Now, how do we get NFIP credits and insurance discounts? This goes back, this is, a little small here, you couldn't go full screen. But this relates back to Forerunner. And what I want to bring out here is, just give me one second. I can't read the loadings. Because we have the Forerunner platform that all your residents can access and all your investors, we have document storage inside of this platform, site-specific to each property. So the new Department of Building and Housing can manage this entire process that FEMA found Highlands didn't have, and we have created now a full permitting process, with accountability in forms, and that's going to be question number one when the community visit comes from FEMA. We also talk about elevation certificates a lot in floodplain areas. Many people have them. I know the mayor and I had a vision early on with Michael that we're just going to get as many elevation certificates as we can get because so many beautiful properties here and homeowners have done a lot of great work, coming to find out that if the elevation certificate has even one error on it, FEMA will not take it. And so through Forerunner, we were able to determine early on that every elevation certificate that we actually had errors on it. And you find, that we had. And by we had, I want to be able to articulate, Councilman Melnick, that CME was your floodplain administrator prior, and they had 17 elevation certificates that they secured during their term. and there wasn't one that didn't have errors. So from the point of view of Stephen Winters, who's certified floodplain manager and construction official, he did not want them in our Forerunner database. That's what we're going to share with FEMA to get this credit, because we'd instantly be thrown out. So we initiated you can upload your own into Forerunner, and we've since changed that. We are trying, I know I am personally trying to work through the 17 to make corrections on them so we can get as many as we can. We're reaching out to homeowners as we go through open permits to secure them. It's a laborious process, but it's so that we can build this floodplain platform, which is so important for Highlands in the future to have this base. And doing it on a digital platform, I think, is superb. I mean, I wouldn't want to do it any other way. The other challenge...
One other thing about the errors, just to note that the error is probably 99% of the errors on these are all due to the surveyor. Either not putting something on the correct line, not signing it, not dating it, not having a seal on it. I mean, it's very silly. A lot of these errors it's just sloppy. Simple things. Simple to fix, but sloppiness that was allowed to just get passed through and no oversight on top of it. But just to let you know, these are the types of things that were on.
And to that note,
sorry, so it's not like they pull out like basically a water heater or like it's not.
No, that would have been a totally different thing. This is the elevation certificate itself is either has a blank where there should be what the number for the low floor is, or if there is a low floor, or, like I said, not signed off on, not sealed. I mean, it's silly, really, when you think about it. So people the homeowner paid for a survey.
Yeah.
The homeowner should have a proper survey and a proper elevation certificate if they're in the flood zone.
and I think looking out for your residents, now that you're able to ensure that before, and Alicia Jones has a terrific process, we work together on it, when an elevation certificate comes in, we run it through the algorithms inside a Forerunner, report is passed out, and Alicia hands it back to the homeowner to say, you paid for this, unfortunately, the professional, needs to correct it. Where it gets a little dicey is some of the older ones, long paid for, long gone, and they are not something we can use. So we're gonna work through that. It's a process, and that's what I wanted to take the time to, let everybody know that it's gonna take some time to build up our foundation. Now, the other thing that's been in your ordinance since 2022 for land use is substantial improvement. And now that we have a new floodplain permitting review process and form that meets FEMA standards, we are going back into your DCA Mitchell-Humphreys fast-track system that you've been maintaining even when you had Middletown as your partner, and we've retained it with the new office also, but I've gone back to the tune of 80 properties to manually put in a 10-year look back on improvements. Because your ordinance says when you look back in a 10-year period and you have 50% of the value of just the structure, not the land, that is a flag under the FEMA NFIP that property needs to be elevated. So if FEMA sees you're not managing that, that's a problem. So we really had no way to manage it. Now, every time a property comes in for a permit, we're going back, we're looking at their substantial improvements. We've had a couple of properties that have 167% of improvements, and as they have open permits, we're working through that to be sure that there's compliance. So it's a comprehensive system, the floodplain management program, and it also is a means that when I anticipate, I'm hopeful that late spring, we're going to be able to call in for our CAB visit, and I'm hopeful that all the things that are in Forerunner, they can see that there's a substantial process here, and I'm hopeful that I can remove some of the national violation property listings because many of them have been elevated, so I'm diligently working on that so that we can show good faith.
So I think you said somewhere near there are 300 properties where the violation is to begin with.
The violations include two categories, actually three. One is repetitive loss. So FEMA tracks back, some of them go back as far as the storm in the 90s when I was here. So repetitive loss properties are flagged in that way. This is not something that the public sees. This is something that the administration sees, and our team sees because we are mitigating it. We're working to take them off so that we can move forward with this status. So, having everything in there when, FEMA comes to give us our visit is going to be extremely helpful. The other two categories are low floor. You have many properties. I think there are 153 repetitive loss properties, and many of which that I've identified that have open permits right now. So that's what we're working with, the open permits. We're not going back to the closed permits. Anything that's active now makes the most sense on how we can, work towards mitigating it. And then the last category was an unusual category. It was increased claims compliance, which is a FEMA category called ICC. And that means that a property was given money to demolish and to elevate, and they did not. So that's the problem with FEMA. So we're working through with Region 2 on how do we, I'm waiting right now on, I want to share it with the mayor and Michael, is what kind of language are we going to put in a letter to send to someone? We don't need to open up Pandora's box. FEMA wants XYZ. I've talked to many people with New Jersey Floodplain Association, and they're like, tread lightly, because it can open up a big problem. We want them remediated. Nobody's expecting us to take anybody's firstborn child for anything. It's just a matter of let's move forward. It's for their benefit. It's for their pocketbook. What they're paying for insurance right now could be helped. I've met many people when we first opened the office in January and February, who were, a house or two away coming in, getting floodplain development permits, and one was paying $3,700 for insurance and the other was paying $400. So there's a lot of disparities out there. People don't really have a place to go. So hopefully this whole process is going to educate and equalize, the status of flood protection and building a resilient community.
So across all those three different categories, if the 300 was the starting number, how many have we mitigated up until this point that we're going to show upon this new visit that's coming in?
One.
What's your goal? How many, every property in the floodplain, what's your goal to have in your database?
Well, the goal is to have a solidified process that I can show them that this is a long-range process. This isn't just we're getting the status. We have to show them that we have Forerunner, we have a comprehensive building and housing office.
But if everything went the way it could go, would that be everybody who's in the floodplain would be in this system?
They all are. Even your properties, every Highlands property is in Forerunner. So I encourage you to go to the flood information page. There's links right on there to the public-facing portion. Michael and the mayor have access to the administrative portion, which has the National Violation Tracker. We're not going out there to advertise that. It's a bad thing for real estate, for investment. We want people to buy houses in Highlands and elevate them and take these properties off the list.
On for all of this time, certainly after Sandy, you could have had a property that was repetitive loss property, but then it was purchased in the last 3 years and completely RAZED. but it's owned outright and the person doesn't want flood insurance, but FEMA doesn't know because they don't have the elevation certificate. So that property could already be managed, but we just haven't gotten there yet to check them off or scratch them off the list.
Yeah.
Because once we have an elevation certificate for them, then they're not in violation anymore.
Right.
And we can show that to FEMA.
Got
So, this slide, I just wanted to, I mean, it's a puzzle piece. CRS insurance discounts, everybody's like, wow, that's great. National violation tracker properties come into play. You know, the CRS activities, which is your education and all the floodplain permitting process, floodplain management. And it all circles around NFIP, those rulings. And you started the ball rolling in August of 2022 with adopting that ordinance. We just didn't have a permitting process to go with it. And so that is the first thing that I undertook when I started up, is that we have to build one. And that turned into, you know, a whole new office, which I think is the most dynamic way to go. Having your construction official also be the certified floodplain manager is of critical importance. And I could say that with expert authority because I worked with it a short time when it was disjointed in different locations, and it was extremely challenging to handle and to make any kind of headway with. So I think, you know, we're totally moving in the right direction. With Forerunner, this slide, just, there's workflows. If you did have a hazard event, these handheld iPads that the office has can go out there, and flood damage assessments can go right in on a mobile app on site. So not only are we collecting substantial improvement data, but should there be an event, you could go out right in the field and capture that. So it all goes into this module, which can be extracted for different things for FEMA. So it's a dynamic tool to be able to use in the field. All the workflows are in there, and the whole building and housing office, all the subcode officials work with a floodplain checklist. Every electric system that has to go in has to be above the base flood elevation. So this is all things that are kind of new to some of the contractors here. It wasn't as stringently looked at, but it's critically important. The other thing we found is using flood-proofed materials. There were quite a few projects since the office opened, and they were not using FEMA flood-proof materials in their new construction. We can't have that. So things are folding together using this tool and using the new office. And as I mentioned, we've got the mobile app for inspections that they can bring out there. The data's all in real time. This goes to your residents and your investors. This is the look of the page. This is 140 Bay Avenue. I just pulled it up. But this gives you an aerial view. There's pictures of the property. There's also the Mod 4 data that's in there. Any particularly warnings that are with the property. This is a site-specific flood elevation. I met with your OEM head, Mr. Kane, and we changed the OEM pages instead of going to the FEMA map service, which I don't like because there's way too many pages. This gives you a user-friendly, site-specific. You can toggle the NFIP maps. We've had, actually, with the mayor's property, the property is actually in 2 zones, and we had questions on it, and we were able to, you know, use the toggle switch in Forerunner to do that. And it's site-specific information to me. I mean, I've been on the phone with realtors, and they're like, wow, I got that right there. I go, yes. And then the office is available if they need, you know, information on construction standards.
Excuse me, Kathy, I have my own home up here right now. Now, how do I ascertain
You go down. There you go.
if we're in compliance? Keep going? Up, go up?
Yeah, I think if you go up, you should have where you're,
I mean, I think it is, but I'm,
I'm sure you
because it's
will.
so new, you know, the house.
Yeah. It's just going to give you your site-specific elevation, your base flood elevation, your design elevation, which is your freeboard, 1 foot above. We have 1 foot in our ordinance, so that's all been predetermined in the algorithms here. Let's not talk about it. I already said to Steve, yeah,
Yeah, it's changing.
smile, Mr. Safety. I already know. So this is a slide, working together for a resilient Highlands, compliance with our floodplain management. We've got elevated properties. Your ordinance since 2022 calls for non-conversion agreements for space below the base flood elevation, the BFE, and Alicia Jones is on that with everyone that comes in. This has to be a deed restriction according to your ordinance filed with Freehold on record so that a buyer or anyone else understands that the property below this sample house right here has a non-conversion agreement. It's not covered by flood insurance. And that goes for properties, which we have a lot, where there are cars underneath. So that is something that wasn't happening before, and that would have been a problem, going forward with CRS. So all of the new forms that are on your website that Stephen Winters, we collaborated, Stephen and I, on a lot of them, and they're all on there for floodplain review process and also for the UCC, regular construction forms. They dovetail together. Now, where are we in the process? So this is a little housekeeping. I'm going to cruise through this. August of 22, I've said it several times, you adopted the floodplain management regulations. June, I came on board to begin the process. August of 23, Highlands requested their 300, we didn't know until we got them, of the national violation properties. And at the same month, we quickly invested in a forerunner floodplain platform, courtesy of the leadership of the governing body, for the future. And then in November of 2023, we obtained the national violation tracker list. Now, getting it, it's a guarded database, but we had permission, because we planned ahead, that this data would be integrated into Forerunner. And it's, only available for the administration, not for public. So we were able to get that done. And in December of 2024, I'm sorry, I got the wrong date up there. Thanks, Alicia. We secured the UCC permitting, fast track software. That's something we did not have access to until December. So that was tremendous, getting the office set up and to be able to go back to see the substantial improvements. We collaborated on all the construction floodplain permitting forms and the public information. There's 30 pages of public information that's available on the floodplain protection site. And I did create a CRS strategic plan that's going to be constantly updated, depending on what it is we're up against now. I think initially I was planning on going through every construction jacket here, and that I determined is world hunger. So instead of world hunger, we're working with open permits, to catch them when there's an opportunity to make a mitigation change. Going back when there's no open permits, we'd just be in a conversation. The other thing that was exceptionally important for FEMA, NFIP, and community rating is to have a procedure on how you keep your elevation certificates. You must say when you require them, where you maintain them. Everything is maintained in Forerunner. So as a resident calls with a question or I get emails to floodplain management. The questions come from the site to me. I answer them. I add that into the log and the activity inside of Forerunner, because that's the other thing that CRS says. What residents have you spoken with them? Have you done it in person? Have you done it by email? So this floodplain platform rolls all that together, so we have kind of one-stop shopping for now and to the future, to maintain these kind of records. And of course, which was alluded to, the only thing constant in life is change. So as floodplain regulations change, we will be able to just integrate them in here with the right changes to algorithms and calculations and be able to move forward with these. And most of all, if we did have a hazard event, that data could be recorded all in one spot, which was not something you had the capability for before.
Is there some review of those entries, since they're manual entries? You're making those entries, I'm assuming?
A review?
Yeah, like, I think we just discussed like how, we've got all these elevation certificates that are incorrect from prior organization. Anything manual is subject to error. Who's checking to make sure that these new entries are accurate? I know that they're not the same thing, but. So you enter, Steve check? Okay. Just want to make sure that there's a process that's doing that kind of audit so that we don't find ourselves 2 years down the road and it's like, here's 16 entries.
No,
I'm sorry, Steve doesn't sign on it until all the errors is fixed, and he review it before he signs on it.
Okay.
So when you upload it, it scans it, and it says there's an error here, there's an error here, and there's an error there. And then, so they don't even let them leave the window.
Just making sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very good.
The algorithms oftentimes give you errors that are not what FEMA calls gigs. So we're apprised of all of them. We want the most accurate elevation certificates. Steve Winters also works in Manasquan and Monmouth Beach, I believe, and he had one error, and they're in the CRS program, and they threatened to take them out. So this is, attention to detail is important, and Forerunner gives you the parameters, and of course, the office is responsible for the floodplain permitting process, not me. I'm simply trying to organize the flow of it so we have the most accurate and comprehensive information.
Great.
Working with your fast-track government system and Forerunner. Okay. In March of 2024, of course, the office opened January 2nd, and we've been rocking and rolling with new permits. And the first report I submitted, and it's in the shared drive, and we went through properties that were elevated. We're marking that in Forerunner. Many properties were elevated 2016, 2023. We may not have an elevation certificate, but we're noting them as elevated, and I'm recalibrating the substantial improvement because it has to be recalibrated. That's something I have to do manually. So I'm going through every report, or every permit, and creating a spreadsheet, which is manual, but it's the only way that I can track it now because Forerunner has everything outside of the special flood hazard area on the hill and outside of the flood zone, as well as everything in. So I track everything, every permit that comes in through the fast-track permitting process. So I have digital access to that as well as what's in Forerunner, and I collaborate with Alicia and Steve and Courtney and the subcode officials all the time. So that's how we're building it. And as I mentioned, possible community assistance visit in spring of 2024. We recently were identified with Middletown. Highlandsboro was identified with Middletown and Brick Township as a pilot program for low floor. FEMA is trying to take low-floor properties off of the National Violation Tracker, so we have a special form, and I had an incredible revelation being on that Zoom call with Steve and FEMA Region 2, in that it gave me hope, because I was tremendously challenged with 300 national violation trackers to mitigate, but both Brick and Middletown have substantial numbers of national violation properties too, and they work at them, so that's why I'm hopeful that with our strong process, we can open the door and begin this in late spring of 2024. That's my hope. I hope I can deliver it to you. It's not something that I can deliver without all the back data that we've been starting, so that's pretty much the overview. The last thing that I didn't make a slide for is that I got involved with the mayor and with Michael, that you have the Bay Avenue redevelopment area, you have a new zoning official here, and you have 2 other redevelopment areas, Captain Cove and Shadow Lawn. And I realized that there were a lot of permits coming through. Not only are they in the flood zone, but they're in the redevelopment area. So there's been a whole re-looking at how that process is going to work. Properties that are in your central business district, Bay Avenue redevelopment area, have a lot of challenges to meet the floodplain management regulations that you've set the bar on. So that is going to be the most dynamic way that Highlands can make progress in that redevelopment area, because as properties come in, you know, they will be insured in the redevelopment area, they'll be elevated. And they'll be, you know, meeting the requirements for mixed-use building, which is flood-proofing, not elevating. So, you know, we're working on all of those angles with it. And so I think it's a tremendous time for Highlands. I just have to say, being here in the 90s and getting a grant I wrote the first grant in New Jersey to elevate homes, and we did elevate 6 of them. I moved on to the Bayshore office afterwards. There was no repeat money. It was a one-time demonstration project. But when I came back, which I visited, I live in the Bayshore area, and I knew there were so many properties being elevated. But just to see, you know, what happened when I remember everything was bungalows, and now it's a whole different terrain completely. We just need to be sure that floodplain permitting process is adhered to, and that we can move forward, you know, to bring economic development to this town, which it already has but I think the importance is doing that 151 scattered site redevelopment area called Bay Avenue, your central business district. That's a real terrific window of opportunity for Highlands. So I don't know if you have any other questions. I feel free to meet with you, to work with you on how to navigate, you know, Forerunner. Play with it a little bit. It's pretty intuitive what's on there. If there's any questions, you can always email me. My email is on the flood protection information. It's floodmanagement@Highlandsboro, and you can call me anytime. So I thank you for the opportunity to brief you on where we are, and I know that there'll be, you know, another time when Stephen Winters and I will probably be able to give you an overview a little bit more about the construction office and all the processes that have been created. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Kathy. Very, very good.